I'm Dan Goldstein, and you're watching Clean Skies News. New rules for offshore drilling arrived in the Gulf this week. The Minerals Management Service said, among other things, companies drilling in the Gulf of Mexico must certify independently that its safety devices, like the blowout preventers, which failed on the Transocean Deepwater Horizon rig, are safe. Joining us to talk about these new rules and the 6-month moratorium on deepwater drilling that still remains is Professor David Dismukes of Louisiana State University's Center for Energy Studies. Professor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, look, MMS seems to be saying, in effect, to the industry, we don't trust you. Is that what they're saying by doing this independent certification?
Well, I don't know if that's exactly the case as much as it is there's a lack of public confidence probably in offshore activities, and this is a way of reassuring the public that the operations are safe by having some kind of independent verification and certification of this equipment. So I think it plays more to creating some confidence in the safety of these activities more than anything.
Now, what exactly is the industry going to have to do with this certification, and can they even get it done in time? The Secretary, Ken Salazar, said this has to be done by the 28th of June, or else they've got to get a waiver. Can the industry even make that deadline?
It's hard to say. I don't know the range of equipment. I haven't had a chance to see all the details on the rules itself. I mean, there's certainly a lot of independent engineering consulting firms in the oil and gas business that have at least the plausibility of being able to meet these requirements, but it really depends on the scope of these activities and the degree of certification that's required. So we'll see. I'm sure a large part of it could be, but you know, we'll see. There may be some things at the margin that get dropped off.
Now, what exactly is the industry telling you? Are they concerned that rigs that might not get certified could get shut down by the government if they don't get it done in time?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people on the Gulf of Mexico are very concerned in the energy business now about the changes in both the shallow water as well as the continued 6-month moratoria and what that means for continued operations. Just the uncertainty alone, I think, with both areas are creating a lot of consternation and making it difficult for people to make decisions. But having said that, people are trying to work around this, and right now we're still, I think, in the evaluation process of looking at options and trying to decide which one to pull the trigger on.
I mean, could the industry, we've certainly heard a lot about cutting corners and whatnot. I mean, could the industry, in the rush to get this deadline done, cut corners in order to get certified?
Well, I would certainly hope that wouldn't be the case, and it's certainly in everybody's best interest to not do that. I think there's going to be a heightened sense of concern for security actions for most of the producers and the drillers right now. So hopefully that won't be the case, and ultimately people will probably decide to not do something rather than to do it unsafe given the current environment.
Yeah. Now, what might the government have done instead of a 6-month moratorium? We've heard quite a lot of consternation about what the effect that's going to be. In fact, we heard today that Louisiana's Senator Mary Landrieu said that as many as 300,000 jobs could be affected. Was the industry looking for something else, maybe a stand down, a safety stand down for the worst operators or something like that?
I don't know that I don't think anybody had any predefined expectations about what was going to come out of this. At least it was my appreciation. There was a lot of uncertainty and nobody knew what was going to be coming out of this. And I don't know that there is a universal industry-wide answer to this at the current time. I mean, I think in the best case scenario, looking at these permits and reevaluating them on a case-by-case basis may wind up being the better approach rather than kind of a one-size-fits-all reaction to this.
And one of the things I had talked to some industry analysts about is perhaps something like barring the worst offenders from going forward on bidding further leases. That would definitely get shareholders' attention, would it not?
It certainly would, but you certainly get into a lot of questions that ultimately that start off regulatory and ultimately we get into legal issues about defining, you know, who's good and who's bad and who's a good player and who's a bad player in this particular instance. So you get into some subjective evaluation terms when you do things like that.
And we've heard a lot from Secretary Salazar saying that he's got the best minds in the business and academia and industry going forward. I mean, if President Obama or Secretary Salazar came to you and asked how you would make offshore drilling safer, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think if we were looking at something right now in the near term to keep this activity going, it would be looking at these permits on a case-by-case basis and probably looking at a wide range of other factors that would include, you know, past performance as well as the ongoing production history of the companies that are operating in these particular areas, as well as their financial ability to deal with any type of safety or environmental accident. So there's probably a variety of parameters you'd want to look at, but I certainly think that it's a doable task.
Now, we hear a lot about this 6-month moratorium. Would you have rather not? There's already been calls that the 6-month moratorium needs to be unpaused, as it were. Are you already seeing some economic effects from this Deepwater drilling embargo?
We're hearing of some. I don't know that there's any real firm, concrete examples right now, but there's a lot of strong indications that people are making decisions to idle some crews and let them go. Others are looking for ways to work around these problems. It is certainly not a good situation. It has the potential to be a very, very bad situation. And what we're going to have to see over the next couple of weeks is, where we fall between those two extremes right now. There are a wide range of outcomes that occur, from taking and reorienting crews and activities into maintenance and other activities, to standing down these and doing maintenance and training, to moving crews to other parts of the world and other deepwater basins, to just laying people off. So it's not real clear what kind of combination of those is going to occur. Yeah,
and it kind of brings me to the last question. Is there a worry that these jobs that you are so talking about may not come back?
Yeah, I mean, the current impacts and the longer run impacts and what it means for the Gulf of Mexico has been of paramount concern for most all policymakers here on the Gulf Coast, particularly in Louisiana. The last 2 days it's been a very heightened concern and interest, and it's something that I think our congressional delegation, our governor, and other state regulators have been trying to impress upon the federal government in terms of this moratorium.
Yeah, and I want to come back to one other thing that hasn't been brought up much, but is certainly starting to get some worries, is that the supply situation. We've heard anything from from these 33 rigs being shut down, that 20,000 barrels might be impacted, to as much as 160,000 barrels, which is about 10% of the Gulf supply. Are people starting to get worried about what the supply situation might be looking like in a few months?
I don't know so much in the short run as maybe, say, the intermediate run. As we move 12 to 24 months out, you're starting to see even financial markets react a little bit to this concern as we move forward. There's a wide range of estimates as to how production is going to be impacted by this, how much is just simply deferred versus how much is just completely avoided or discontinued as a result of these actions. And we'll just have to see. I mean, I guess if you could say one of the fortunate situations that we have right now is that demand is somewhat lackluster, and the need for those supplies in the very, very near term is not as pressing as it may be in the intermediate term. So it's going to be something I think is going to be a little bit more longer run impact, but something that is that we need to think about very closely.
But it sounds like short term, the real concern is about jobs. And we heard Secretary Salazar say today that BP could be on the hook for some of the lost jobs in the oil industry. Do you see that as being a bone in contention going forward, that BP is actually potentially paying for oil workers to sit on the dock and fishermen getting hurt?
Yeah, I mean, it would be some irony that they would have to pay for their competitors' jobs and for some of their avoided programs, but we'll just have to see how that works out. It is true that in the very, very short run, these jobs are the first and most important area of concern, I think, for everybody in the industry, as well as the policymakers and the local parishes and communities along the Gulf Coast, all the way over from Texas and all the way over to Alabama. So,
all right, Professor, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you for having me.
We've been talking with Professor David Dismukes, the Associate Executive Director of the Center for Energy Studies at Louisiana State University. I'm Dan Goldstein, and you're watching Clean Skies News.